You're listening to Dead Air Podcast, part of splatterpictures.net.
What's up, everybody? Wes, Dead Air Night with Always.
Typical Lydia.
Today's show, we're going to be doing the 2023 soon-to-be classic Late Night with the Devil. Ladies and gentlemen, Jack Delroy.
Oh, you see, you would be a perfect Gus. Wes, Gus. See, it's even like very similar. And you would have shone in that sort of role back in the 70s.
You know what? If there's any excuse for me to perform a theremin in front of a large studio audience, I would absolutely be there. Speaking of music and theremins, there's no theremins in this, but you guys just got to enjoy our brand new intro that was made by Lydia's husband, Chris. It's really awesome. I love it a lot, and I know Lydia does too. And so just officially thank you, Chris, for making this brand new intro. It's been over 10 years since we've changed the intro to our show. And a big shout out to Andy Negative and the patron saint of Plagues for allowing us to use that song for so many years. But it was time for a change, and sometimes change is good, and this change is good. It's new, but it's retro, just like today's film we're talking about.
It does fit very well with this film and our show, and that was sort of the harbinger of the change, as well as patron saint of Plagues music taking a huge shift. So check out Andy Negative. He spends a lot of time on YouTube and TikTok, but you can also check out Anorex, the creator of our new song, at anorex.com, and you can catch up with him on Bandcamp. And a friend of the show, Thomas Nichols, had him do the music for T-Horror, his comic book, which has another iteration since then. So you can check all TN Comedy, check out T-Horror, and more Anorex music there as well as he does the music on my show too. Or more accurately, he did the music for a movie that never came out, and I stole the music afterward. So it's getting used on my other shows as well. This song, Dradia, is produced specifically for the Dead Air podcast. He may be releasing it eventually on his Bandcamp, but if you really like it that much, I'll throw a full copy of it at the end of the next couple shows so you can listen to the full song. But yeah, hope everyone enjoys. As far as Late Night with the Devil, this was one that I actually went to see in theater. And you enjoyed it on Shudder, did you not?
I did. I watched it when it dropped on Shudder. This is very unique for us. This might be the newest film. I understand that it's been out. Well, it came out last year. It did the film festival circuit. But in terms of when we all normies can get our eyeballs on it, it's only been a few weeks. And this is the bleeding edge of horror cinema. Everyone who talked about this film has already done so. Now it's our turn.
Yeah, that's our style, right? Talk about something 10 years, 20 years, 30 years after it's made. You know, we're pretty quick on the draw with this one because we don't normally watch films that are just in theater right now and talk about them on the show. It's not something that we typically do. We did do, Strike Media had contacted us with the Jekyll and Hyde show. So we did watch a movie that was very, very new, but that was a very rare occurrence. And this is yet another rare occurrence. I really want to get back into the moldy oldies quite a bit because this movie does speak to the 70s and that sort of weird way that people would, you know, sort of like with a theremin skit, as if Jack doesn't know what a theremin is. I don't know what it is that people in the 70s talked like they didn't know, like everything was new to them. It was just a weird sort of like gotcha kind of uh, I'm a dummy kind of shtick that they were constantly doing. And I don't really understand it, but I like it.
There is a drive when you are doing television like this, particularly something that would be in front of a studio audience, is to generate conversation. And you need a straight man, you need a silly man, you need you need to yes and each other, and you need to play up the conversational aspects, because let's be honest, not only would Jack Delroy likely know what a theremin is because he's a human being that exists within the world, but let's say for the sake of argument, he didn't know what a theremin was. Are you trying to tell me that he had no idea that he was going to walk onto a set that day and there would be a theremin there, and Gus didn't already practice with it before the show went live? Like, this doesn't take all day to tape. That's the magic of television. It looks as though you are experiencing everything for the first time. But one of the things that when you become kind of a scholar of this shit, you start to see the seams of pre-planned conversations, pre-planned everything. Something that's meant to sound like improv is very, very structured.
I get that. And that explains it. And on the other hand, we're not that good at this because we're way too high on ourselves to admit that we don't know something. And we are 100% know-it-alls on this show and rarely learn anything new unless, we do catch ourselves in those moments. And I think that is the part where you get more audience relation on a show like the Night Owls show and here on Dead Air, is when we are learning and we are teaching one another and we have differing opinions. We're playing, as you say, fat, skinny, or tall man, short man, straight man, silly man, or whatever. We're little Siskel and Eberts here. And
that's true.
It's those differences that are entertaining and engaging and relatable, because whether you relate to only one of the personalities that is on stage, whether it be Jack or Gus or Christu or Lily, you can interchange that too and relate to portions of their personality that are showing on the screen.
Yeah.
And I really do. I think that's what I like the most about that. And its sister broadcast, which we'll do much later in this season for Halloween, Ghost Watch.
Yes, and that is where I would love to start this conversation, because I had a massive amount of hype leading into this film. I was thinking about it for months, and that was because of how this film was sold to me. One, it stars Dave DeSmalchin. Smart. I love that guy. He's a great character actor, and I couldn't wait to see him where he was literally the star of the show. Then secondly, it is a new film that takes place in the 70s. Smart. That's just for me. That sounds great. Thirdly, it is going to be a lost media, lost episode, vaguely documentary, vaguely perhaps found footage, treated as real in the style of Ghost Watch. I love Ghost Watch, and one of the things that I thank this film for, and I saw it all over social media, was introducing people to Ghost Watch. And we had threatened to do that movie for our next Halloween episode, last Halloween episode. And don't you worry, don't you fret. That's what we're doing. I think we've got some other Halloween surprises too, maybe. But for Halloween episode proper, I insist that, Lydia does too. We're doing the Ghost Watch film. Excited for that. But, so I was bursting at the seams. I couldn't fucking wait to watch this movie.
And it wasn't even stuff like, this is the only Rotten Tomatoes 100% rating ever, and this movie is perfect, and all of the accolades, and how no one had anything bad to say about it. All the reviewers loved the shit out of this movie. It's all those very personal things. I love the idea of a lost footage. I love Ghost Watch and things like it, and WNUF Halloween special. I love all of that sort of stuff. retro redone. I was hoping for something more like Antrim, and I believe I got it in that it is a lost thing. The pseudo documentary nature of it, I liked. There were some angles about it that didn't really jive with me that I hadn't expected, and it seemed to be those things that no one talked about. But they're not big, so I still do count this as a very high rated film in my mind, and absolutely loved it. So it did live up to what I had expected. And the thing I didn't expect is the thing I think I love the most about it is this almost inadvertent, if not completely 100% overtly advertent and very much on purpose, kind of relationship that this movie has with its audience, be it the television audience you viewing at home or in a theater. And I think that's where all of its huge accolades really came from, was people seeing this on the big screen in groups of people. And if you're in the know, like we all know, those who listen to the show, if this isn't your first ride at the Dead Air Rodeo, you know I hate the theater. I don't like going to the theater. I don't think watching movies with groups of people is a fun thing to do or the proper thing to do. I don't think most movies are built to be watched like that, and it's doing them a disservice almost all the time. That said, this particular movie is made to be watched in a theater, and it is very much enhanced by watching it as part of an audience, because there's so much audience interaction in the show, more so than a lot of those like false shows like Ghost Watch. There was some audience interaction, but not really. You could tell that it was made on a mostly closed studio, and you didn't feel like part of that show, and you didn't really feel part of the viewing audience either. This movie, Late Night with the Devil, really does it right in that halfway through the movie, you're sort of looking around and thinking like all they have to do now is implant some of these actual actors or people dressed like some of these actors beside me in the theater, and I might pee my pants.
Especially the skeleton man. He'd be a good person to just be jump scaring people in the theaters. I'm jealous that you saw this in the theater and I didn't. We'll get into it a little bit, but there's aspects of this film that make me, first of all, falling into being overhyped for a film, you're inevitably going to be disappointed because you are going to imagine what it was going to be like. And I wanted things to be a little bit different. My expectations were sky high. And so the things that didn't work for me, I still love this movie, but it certainly keeps it from hitting like an all-time one of the greats in terms of modern horror. When you had talked about feeling like a participant because you were in an audience, surrounded by audience members, watching a show that was intended to be viewed by a studio audience, it creates this multi-leveled scenario that it's just one of those, you can't go home again. Like, that's it. Maybe one day I can watch this film in the theaters, but it will never be for the first time. And I wonder if that is so. Yeah, I mean, like, if nothing else, I have yet one more regret to live with for the rest of my life. And I fell into the fucking trap of what I hate is people not, because I love going to the movies. I've always loved going to the movies, the experience, the smells, the sight, walking into the theater. I love that experience. I genuinely fond memories of going to the movies with my siblings, with my, not my dad because you couldn't smoke in the theater, but my mom and my friends. Oh my God, my friends and I would go to the movies every single weekend. We saw everything. And so I love the theater. And I fell into the fucking trap of a modern audience viewer. Wow, it's coming on Shudder in a month. So it made me not want to put pants on and go to the movies. And I had wondered, if I didn't know that it was coming out in a month, I probably would have gone to the movie theaters because I wouldn't have been able to stand it. I was like, I gotta see this fucking movie. But it's just like, if you just wait a couple more weeks, Wes, you could just watch it from the comfort of your home. And that would be a lot more convenient, wouldn't you? And when it kind of didn't fall flat, but just didn't meet my expectations, oh, maybe I probably should have seen it in the theaters.
It's weird because no one was talking about what an effect it may have had on those watching it in the theater. And perhaps it's because so many people do go to the theater all the time. It doesn't dawn on them this might be different watching it at home, or they already view the theater as the elevated experience, and it goes without saying. But for someone like me, it was a profound difference, and I noticed immediately how it was so cool to be in that audience. And then further on in the film, like, oh, I really feel like that screen doesn't end. That where the shadow begins of the studio audience on this screen, it just kind of spills out into the audience I am actually sitting in. And it was just done so well. It's weird to me that no one mentioned it, because if you would have read a review after review that said this is a must see in the theater because it has a certain spell that it cast between the screen and the audience that you're sitting in, you probably would have been more compelled to go see it, because you'd be like, yes, this is why I love the theater.
Exactly.
Aside from all the other things.
Yeah, it's like seeing a band live. Sometimes you just need that experience to really have an impact. I tend to love bands way more that I've seen live than I haven't seen live, because you're part of that experience. You see that and feel that raw energy. You feel it in your chest. Same with a really good film going experience. But fuck all that, Lydia. We're not here to talk about any of that bullshit. What is this movie even about anyways? Lay it on me.
On so many levels, this movie is about what will you sacrifice to get what you want? How hard will you strive for that ultimate success? And that is an old story. That's a story that's been told many, many times. And this one has the angle of dreamer here awake. And that what we've already talked about, in a way, that blending, that thin veil between the studio audience that is fictional in the film and the real studio audience you could have been sitting in to watch this film, that boundary is very flimsy in this film, and it's like to good effect. The boundary between what you actually hold dear and what success means to you is very flimsy if you're Jack in this film. And there's the difference between a weird sacrificial Bohemian Grove style Satan-ish kind of group and its real world counterpart of movers and shakers here on planet Earth that attend a similar sort of thing. That is a very blurry line as well. So it's really about what would you do for success in a fictional setting versus the real reality, and how those two things relate. What's going on in your head, or the head of Jack, and what's going on planet Earth.
Very well put. And that pretty much can inform you of everything you need to know. It's a Faustian like deal that Jack gets into. But before all of that, with this film starts off with, I really wish they stuck with this more, but at the very least, they set the table with what feels like watching a documentary. Now, there's a bit of, if you've seen films like Grave Encounters, that have a setup where it says this is the footage that you're going to be watching. The first thing that they do is they give you a documentary style introduction to explain to you who Jack Delroy was, the era in which this show Night Owls was coming out. So they immediately bombard you with like I mean, you're seeing Berkowitz, you're seeing the gas price problems, you're seeing all of these hallmarks of the 1970s, all the strife, the good and the bad. You're seeing famous killers and whatnot. And then you are getting this story of a fictional TV show in competition with a real TV show. And I always find that this blending of history and fiction very fascinating. When I was a little bit younger and I was encroaching or beginning my own writing career, I sometimes felt weird about inserting my fiction into historical events. And I think that I had gotten some criticism early on by a friend of mine who didn't like that aspect of it. And so I had said to myself, "Oh yeah, I hate when they do that," when it was really I was just feeling self-conscious about the fact that I had done that. And now that we're looking at it through this context, I find it very, very fascinating to give that a bit of a historical context. There's a lot of historical context because even a hallmark of a late night TV show is timely jokes. You're on every single night, and so you're going to be walking up and hitting your mark with your hands in your pockets, adjusting your tie, and you're going to quip about the news of the day, pop culture, politics, and Jack Delroy does all of that stuff too for it to, and it's just shitty enough that it seems very authentic because, like, you know, like late night jokes are like, you know, but like that is the level of humor that you're going to be getting, particularly something in the 1970s. But we get a story about a person's rise to fame and then stagnating and then struggling, and also some weird, creepy gentleman's club stuff that is incorporated into the documentary. Let me ask you this, because we've talked about, you know, Satanism and cults and kind of how they're represented in film and stuff like that. When this aspect, which I suppose the title of the fucking thing is Late Night with the Devil, and I understood that it was a possession film, so yeah. But the second they get into the cult stuff, hokey, not hokey, does that work? Are we tired of this?
I'll never, ever, ever, ever be tired of demonic possessions, demonology, Satanism, Satan worship, devil worship, if you will, satanish. And I really wish that people reviewing this, not us, of course, but other people reviewing this, wouldn't continue to call it like the satanic cult that is in this, because it's not really satanic. And they talk about like ancient satanic writings when the Church of Satan would have only been founded less than 10 years before this cult of Abraxas, which is not, they're not worshiping the devil or a devil or Satan. They are worshiping Abraxas, and it's very clear. So it's Abraxasism, I suppose, abracadabrasm, or something. But yeah, I'll never get old. It'll never rub me the wrong way. I love it, even if it's wrong, even if it's pandering, even if they continuously allow other people to over and over refer to it as satanic, because it's not, and it's funny. But then you can look at this on a very surface level, and it's fun, and I like to play these fun games where, you know, you notice when anything in a Stephen King movie has 666 on it, like the truck on the bridge on a Maximum Overdrive, and like, you know, you just notice the truck, there's numbers on the truck in Pet Sematary, and there's like numbers, like phone numbers have 666 in them in every Stephen King film, and it's fun. And speaking of fun, food folks and fun, that's Secret Satan. Thank you, McDonald's. That's the 6th letter of the alphabet. I love that shit. So watching this movie, really, and seeing like, ooh, Jack's on stage and there's an owl behind him on the thing that's painted for the artwork of this TV set. And the owl's kind of got these 2 horns. So if he stands just so, then he has horns. So he must be the devil. It's just fun. Other people may read far too much into that and be like, oh, these horns and that devil and all these devils, and his producer must be the devil because he has horns, or this producer's always smoking like the devil. Like, it's fun. It's just fun. But yeah, I didn't find it hokey, especially because whether you already knew the Grove was based on Bohemian Grove, a real thing, or that's news to you, it's fun to discover those things, to draw those parallels, or to have someone turn to you and be like, that's a real thing, hey? You get that conspiratorial kind of feel, and it's just plain fun. And one thing I really like is there is another sort of Grove men's club that isn't all, Bilderberg type people that do hang out in the Sierra Mountains. And it is like a super secret, not satanic cult of men that have a quiet place up there to do whatever it is that these dudes do. But Bigfoot have been frequenting the area. And it's just a wonderful other angle to me, because I'm like, oh man, not only can we put every other conspiracy theory in here, but Bigfoot makes an appearance in my mind.
I'm just imagining him with like a fez and a big cigar sitting in a high back leather chair, like with a newspaper, like complaining about his stocks and like Nike shoes or something like that.
Yep, that's Bigfoot. That's what he does. And he thinks it's funny that everyone's got this focus on owl worship, where he's like, little do they know. And then he tuts his cigar and taps ash. Just so. But how did you enjoy the owl-headed dude? Because this has been the year of owl-headed dudes here on the show.
I did enjoy the owl-headed dude. I liked the sort of Gnostic paper mache look to a lot of these members from the Grove. This Grove aspect is something that's introduced very early onto the film, and you'll either go with it and let the film tell you its story, or you're going to pretty much figure out exactly what is going on in the entire rest of the story immediately, because they lay down very remedial building blocks of a narrative. And one of the main criticisms I would have of this film is the story is far too simple. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but I couldn't help but, so there's this mysterious cult in the Grove. He signed a deal and got this big fat payday, and now he's in direct competition with Carson, and his wife, who never smoked, all of a sudden dies of lung cancer. And so you're like, oh well, I know exactly what happened. Your job as the audience member in that instance is to decide, does that bother you? Does that not bother you? For me, I was a little bummed out because I hate knowing where a film is going. I really listen, if I figure things out, I figure things out. And there's been tons of times where I know exactly what is going to happen. Look, fuck, my favorite subgenre of horror is a slasher. The teenagers die. Big surprise. But but sometimes, and I guess in this case, it was just one of those things where I thought to myself, oh, that's kind of a bummer. And I think, again, going with my expectations of what I thought this film was going to be versus what was very quickly being presented to me, were two different things. I needed to reconcile that in real time so I could get out of my own way and try to enjoy the film that I was watching. So this is the situation that we have. When Jack Delroy is competing for these ratings, it is not doing well. And not only can he never seem to overtake Carson, and again, like we've seen this in real life with late night shows competing with each other, Lennon and Letterman and all of the falderall with those ratings wars back in the day. But now with Carson and Delroy, he is really trying to pull out all the stops. And you show all of like the sketches, and it really comes off as a variety show. Now, listeners, you might not know this, but back in the day, now everyone's got a fucking late night show, and they all are roughly about an hour long. But back in the day, the Carson show was like 3 fucking hours. And you would have these guys sitting in each other, like, so they would have sketches and they would have massively long interviews. They would have musical numbers. They would have all of this stuff where they were really at no concern to wrapping things up. It was just long, languid conversations with a bunch of dudes smoking. And so a lot of the greatest hits moments that you watch from those old Carson episodes really were some of the stuff that was like not scripted, some of the stuff that happened because the broadcasts were so fucking long and people would get loopy and real comedy would come out of those strange moments. And so I see a bit of similarity in trying to encapsulate what a 1970s late night show was like back then. And I really want to put that into perspective for people, because there's so many skits and there's so many like different varied guests, where it's like nowadays it's so machine-like in like monologue. First guest, it's a celebrity, you know them. Second guest, it's a smaller celebrity, you still know them, but they're a smaller celebrity. Musical guest, if we have time, sometimes they get cut, or a comedian, we're out of here. That's how these fucking shows operate. And, and then they insert the commercial breaks in and all that kind of stuff. So Jack, he's going to do this Hail Mary of, it's Halloween. There's a really popular book that is circulating all over the country, the world, about a possession. And this has to go with this young girl found in this cult, in this house, like a, I don't know, what do you call it? Like a Jim Jones type situation, where you find like a little girl there. She's taken in by June Ross Mitchell, who is a author, psychiatrist, works in the supernatural, and she is made Lily the subject of this extremely famous book. Was there any books that you can think of this era that would have been similar, that was combining the supernatural with like true crime or something like that?
Maybe not so much supernatural, but Three Faces of Eve is exactly what it reminded me of, with these taped conversations with a doctor and a girl who had a split personality, or I guess, what is it that they call it now?
Dissociative.
Dissociative
disorder.
DID, dissociative identity disorder. That. So it reminded me so much. And that book was everywhere. And I'm picturing this book being, and not only do they use the Rosemary's Baby font on the front of this book, which is really handy.
I noticed that, yeah.
It gave that sort of angle. Like, that was another book that in the 70s on everybody's bookshelf, right? And everyone was talking about it. Same with Three Faces of Eve, maybe to a lesser extent, because you had to not just be a fiction fan to be interested in Three Faces of Eve or have watched the film, which came out, I guess it was in the 70s that the film came out, and the book was a little earlier. I'd have to look it up for sure. But it reminded me so much, especially with the taped conversations of a female doctor talking to this housewife that had these 3 personalities, which feels like a demonic possession and has been blamed for a demonic possession, and vice versa. So I think that that's what it reminded me of most entirely. And I really liked your idea of having this sort of like almost like loopiness that takes over after the nth hour mark of recording this show, because it was a very different landscape as far as television, and these hosts were very different sort of personalities, where we have the late night sort of like infotainment shows with these very different sort of personalities that aren't, don't have, they're not allowed to have anything that they've swept under the rug. Twitter will find it, and Twitter will come for them. So they can't have spicy personalities whatsoever. They can't have secrets. They can't have any of these things that made watching these like very very patriarchal talk show hosts back in the day interesting and edgy, because they were the most edgy thing. And like Jimmy Kimmel or whatever, whoever is late night show people now, is not an edgy person to watch, and you're not really learning a lot that you can't learn off the news. Real conversations were happening on these shows back in the day, and what happened when the show was over is the station went off the air for the night, for crying out loud. So there wasn't like 24-hour news or 24-hour infotainment or entertainment on television. The evening began and ended with these shows. I think this sort of like almost hypnotic mood starts when you start watching this film and you see about 10 minutes of production companies that are involved in this film, and so many of the like title cards for producers and film companies and the main film companies and the people that brought this film to us. So you're watching like almost as much as you've watched the intro, where it's just title cards, and then you're watching this mini documentary, which is stuff that we've ingested by osmosis all of our lives, like Manson Girls, Johnny Carson, covers of Time magazine, those sorts of things, where they could have really put almost anything in there. Same with the title cards of all the companies that have brought together to bring us this film, all the hard work that they did. It all just sort of blends into one at that point to be this Night Owls, the intro to Night Owls, which is where this show lives and dies. This whole movie is about the show Night Owls. And I think that that's the also interesting thing, is whether you kind of have solved the film at the very beginning, knowing that his wife died, knowing that he made some sort of deal, and probably with the devil, not only because of the title of it, the horns everywhere, and the fact that people smoke so much cigarettes, they must be devils. And the whole like Grove thing, you're still strapped in. At least I was entirely strapped in, because I'm like, you know what? All that's fun, sort of icing on the cake. The cake is what I'm interested in, because it's a heady, sweet, and salty mix that is this late night show. I want to see how it unfolds.
One of the things that I find very fascinating about Jack Delroy's character is he has got an edge to him that is very present pretty much from the get-go. And someone who was reviewing this film had put it into these words, where you really are watching a man trying to keep a show together while the show is falling apart, and how you try to carry on as if everything is okay and going according to plan. And a word from our sponsors, or after these messages, stay in your seat, folks. Oh boy. And even watching his funny man, his mouthpiece Gus, try to, so who's from out of town, after something supremely bizarre has happened, is where a lot of this tension and awkwardness comes from. And in that opening monologue of scenes from the show, where they even have a moment in which Jack Delroy cusses out a guest for, we don't really know the context of it, but he was like, I'll be back and you won't be. And it has like, sort of like straightens out his blazer really sort of sharply. And you get this, oh my God, like, it's like you're really watching a man try to project that he's a nice guy when he's not. Like, he's not a friendly guy. He is in show business and he is performing, and he just wants to be popular. He wants to win in the ratings. And if he has to talk to these imbeciles to do it, that's what he's going to do. Not saying that he's a bad dude. I'm saying that the veneer of Guy Smiley ain't working on me, at least not while I'm watching this film. And again, it's such a delicate balancing. I'm so happy to see Dave DeSmallchin have this opportunity to be the focus, because he is in every fucking scene of this movie. And he like has by far the most dialogue. It hinges like a host of a show. This film hinges on his shoulders, and it's about time that the guy has been given a shot like this, because how often do we see this guy in a film and we're like, oh, there's not enough of him, and now we get a whole we get a whole film. But when this film came out, this is what I thought, that the film was being sold to me like this. This was going to be a late night TV show in which a man is interviewing a little girl who is possessed by a demon, for a more articulate description. No, that is somewhat what this film is about. But we got other guests. We got a cold reader, like
the amazing
Christou. And at first when I was introduced to this character, he really reminded me of like the psychic in Grave Encounters, or even to the real world. There was that guy in the 90s that became really popular, John something, or I can't remember.
Yeah, crossing over. What's his face?
Yeah, crossing over. Again, a cold reader. It's a parlor trick. It's to make people believe, and watching him like sort of be insistent of the names that he's hearing and no one saying anything, and you're like, oh, you're sort of twisting in your seat because it's so fucking uncomfortable. Watching a man fail at being a TV psychic who travels around and makes a fortune. But this turned into something that could have easily irritated me into probably my one favorite scene in the movie. This is so good. Christou is such a great character.
He really is. And I find that he plays off Jack really well too, because he's trying to be very serious about his mystical powers. And Jack's like trying to be very serious about, this is a guest, a high in demand guest that I've landed on my show. I might not believe them, and I want to make jokes because that's what my job is now, is to crack jokes. And the studio audience is even like, I'm going to crack as many fucking jokes as I can, while this guy's trying to, not be overly exasperated in doing this psychic reading of the crowd. Like, it's just very strange. But the way that ends with Christou having someone cross over, and he asking the crowd while he's in anguished pain, is anyone got a mini? I have a mini. Does anyone know a mini? I see an unmarried man with a wedding band. And he's like clutching his head. His eyes are rolling back. It's the first weird, I guess it would be AI, but I mean, imagine if he was able to do that. I would barf every day I met this guy. Oh my God. The way his eyes are rolling back, he's clutching himself, is so anguished. You almost tend to forget that 1 minute ago, you were laughing at this dude because he was like, Peter-ish, Peterman, Peterman? Okay, I have a P, kind of like, somebody help me out here. Somebody at least pretend that this could be a ghost they know. He did have a touching moment with this other family, but like, to go from, does anyone know anyone that's dead whose name begins with P? Seriously, help me out here. Throw me a frickin' bone. To what we get with him having made contact with a very powerful spirit. It also is the beginning of that break between what's happening on screen and what's happening behind the scenes, because we have black and white footage described in the beginning of the show as the rare behind the scenes footage that was taped during the making of this show that has been pieced together with the final airing of this show. So everything in color, like Christou clutching his head, on the warm tones and the very 70s sort of Polaroid tones of the show, and the black and white behind the scenes footage. This is the first time we really cut quite harshly to that, and the change of attitude between people. And that change of attitude really does speak to old late night television, where Jack, like you were saying, he's trying to be the nice guy, and he's really not. Like so many people that are forced to put on a smile for years and years. I'm sure it gets to you after a while. And there's this one part later on in the show where he's dealing with the skeptic that is a guest on the show. And when it goes to behind the scenes, he's saying to his producer, like, oh my God, I thought you were going to keep me away from that asshole. and they're trying to appear as like friends-ish on the show, but behind the scenes he wants nothing to do with this guy. He wants him as far away from him and everyone he knows as possible because he thinks he's a big douchebag. And times when like Jack even innocently sits in the wrong chair and he's like, "Oh, not my chair," and he switches chairs, like those sorts of things. He's got this sort of alacrity, which we've seen David Desmalchian in a lot of stuff, and the Chainsaw Awards. So he has been like a show host. And at the beginning of Late Night with the Devil, when he's talking about it says Halloween special and saying spooky, I'm just picturing him as the host of the Chainsaw Awards. So it's doing that thing again to me where I'm like in between worlds, and the veil is very thin between reality, where David Desmalchian, the human being, has hosted Chainsaw Awards like a show, and he is here now as Jack Delroy, the show host, and I love it.
Do you think that that was part of it? Do you think that people saw him hosting the Chainsaw Awards and it's like, this guy's kind of like a creepy, kooky, he's capable of doing this? What if we put him in a late night show on the TV, as in the 70s? I wonder, like, I'm always curious about, like, because you hear stories all the time of like, the writer director saw this person in this film and they knew that they would be perfect, and so they wrote this role for them. Yeah, Carmichael, as a character, as the skeptic, seems to be, there's a part in which purposefully grading that this character is, but man alive, it seems like he is in competition with no one but himself to be the sassiest, smarmiest, douchiest motherfucker on the planet, to the point in which when June essentially is like, "Can I finish? Like, can I fucking talk?" Like, I'm just like, "Yes, good," because I was like, the amount that you are interrupting somebody, and in a weird way it would almost be, is Carmichael attempting to break the spell, because he knows that people who are flim flam artists, their only power is speech. It's talking. It's getting you on their side, and they're very skilled at being performers and acting and saying the right things and in just the right way. So is his constant interruption almost like his own abracadabra, if we could pull from the film? When Christou gets this message for this mini, and the anguish, the pain, it looks genuinely, and we've all had a migraine or a bad headache, and I just imagined it looked like times 10 whatever the worst pain you've ever experienced. And him trying to compose himself, they're like, "Oh, you're gonna stick around for a little while." I'd be like, no, actually. And he just needs some water. And the actor Faisal Bazi, who played Christou, his demeanor shift from that contact with this entity is it's subtle. He's quite flushed. He's very stressed out. He's trying to be composed. And I can't reconcile in my mind, what is this character going through right now? Are they, oh my God, this whole time I thought it was a fucking fraud.
Yeah.
Or are they not a fraud and they're like, "Oh my God, that was a really powerful, scary fucking thing that just happened to me and I'm shaken from it." Which is it? Is he a flim flam artist that finally got a taste of true psychic power, or is he a true psychic who just encountered something scary? Or it could be both.
Or is he somewhat possessed at this point? He could be, we could have a body hopping demon here that has somewhat taken up residence within him, and that's why he's so out of sorts, because he's battling it or not there at all. Perhaps his demeanor shift is intense, where he's like yelling at the makeup girl, and he's sitting there, but he looks like he's barely there at all. He's just kind of shaking and looks like he's going to vomit any minute, which he eventually does.
Yeah, big gnarly black vomit. Their next guest being Carmichael, and he is there to debunk Christou and basically everything. I know he's going to be sticking around. Now, his thing is he is a magician turned skeptic. And in his estimation, it's his job to expose people for the frauds they are, even going so far as to having a check awarded to somebody for $10,000 if they can prove beyond any doubt that they possess supernatural abilities, psychic abilities, or anything like that, confidently saying that they have yet to sign a single check over to anybody, and they try to apply science. He does have the line that I really enjoy where he was like, I admit the world would be more interesting if these types of things were real. That's how I feel. I want ghosts and the afterlife, because that would be comforting, to exist. I want demons and monsters to exist. I like the idea of these things. I don't think that they're true. It's just a fun thought to make the information more interesting. This character, by the way, was apparently based off of a guy I had never heard of, but he was based off of a real magician turned skeptic, James Randi. And he had there was an altercation that he had similar to on this show on a late night TV show in Australia.
Was it against Uri Geller? Because Uri Geller would be the late night talk show darling psychic person that would have been on every talk show when I was a very young kid.
They bring up Uri Geller in this movie, don't they?
Oh, I don't know. Do they? If they do, then I missed it. And that's another little gem I would like.
I feel like I saw at least when Carmichael was sort of standing behind somebody, it was at least somebody holding a spoon. For listeners, Uri Geller was quite famous for bending spoons. I don't know how else to tell it. He said that he would
yeah, that's what he did.
Yeah, he would hold a spoon, and he went all over the world. And he will hold a spoon, and in his estimate, he was just like, I just look at the spoon and I say, bend, 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 bend. And then the spoons begin to melt as if liquefied, you know.
And he did appear. I just Googled it very, very quickly. There are some Johnny Carson Uri Geller, which is probably where I would have seen Uri Geller as a kid. My parents were very big into that sort of stuff. We had all sort of like how to hone your ESP and awaken your fifth sense and stuff like that, or sixth sense rather. My parents were very big on that, and they thought it was great. Like parapsychology was, we had everything except a set of those cards with the square, the circle, the cross, the triangle, and 3 squiggly lines. Yeah. Very Uri Geller fun there, testing that parapsychology test that you can use for remote viewing or whatever. I wouldn't have been surprised had my mom come home with a set of those cards at one point. They were that into it. But yeah, and this was the amazing Randy. And that's like old gems. I probably saw this guy on TV, but I wouldn't have been able to recall at all. That's very cool because they do Car, as they call him for short. They do Carmichael so well. He is like that cigar smoking. When you said, he was brought on the show to debunk a lot of these things as a skeptic, and I'm like, are you sure he wasn't just brought on the show to wear cashmere smoking jackets and puff cigars like all night long and be an asshole? Because that's what he does. Drinks, smokes, and be's an asshole.
The best thing about his jacket getting ruined by Christou's vomit is getting his backup jacket, which is perhaps even more ostentatious than the jacket he was wearing.
From his portmanteau and ordering the makeup girls around. Like, oh my God. It is the most heinous crushed velvet. And like none of these people have fashion sense, much like millennials these days. They do not know how to wear pants. They have no idea. And they have no idea what colors go good together whatsoever. I guess they were so used to it back in the day being on film in black and white, so it didn't matter what color you wore, perhaps. And this new age of Technicolor was just baffling to them. So they didn't know that powder blue and wine crushed velvet did not go good together. Just so gross. What a gross color palette that guy. And it works because they've colored him appropriately. I mean, Jack is a suave looking, intelligent, well-dressed guy that knows how to wear pants. And they have Carr, on the other hand, as foil in a way, who is like hardly shaven, greasy looking, a jerk, smoking non fucking stop. Like Jack might sneak a puff of a cigarette in between commercial breaks out in the back where no one can see, but this guy's like openly smoking throughout the whole thing. And he is wearing garish colors, horrible clashing colors. And he looks more of a devil than the Xander Diabo guy who headed the Abraxas cult.
You're quite right about that. But I tell you who has a wonderful, if not weird, Mormon-esque fashion sense. That is our next guest, a pair of guests, June and Lily. This is like what the show is about. This is which makes you wonder, again, to fill these really long broadcast schedules that they used to have in the 1970s. This is why you would have so many segments that were so long, and everyone is here to see this survivor of a mass suicide, subject of this very famous, popular, buzzworthy book. I think by the time this interview happens, the book had basically just come out. June knows Jack Delroy, or at least a little bit from television and stuff like that. And when they bring this person on, they tell this person's story. The only thing that is like, it's like immediately combative because, of course, who's there but Carmichael, who can't wait to interrupt June and talking about Lily as the subject of this person who is possessed, but also who has like a mother-daughter relationship with this person. She has taken Lily in. Lily, what do you want to say about her very strange performance choice? I didn't dislike it. It's very distinct. It's very interesting. It's very otherworldly, but I couldn't quite put my finger on how uncanny it was.
The temp or the assistant in the show Mythic Quest has a very similar look to her. The borderline psychotic, definitely on the spectrum look is definitely a thing once you've worked with people. And I've worked with a few people, and I've met a few people when as a summer camp counselor, there was a consecutive YMCA summer camp for the developmental delayed and all sorts of other people with different comorbid difficulties. And one of them was somebody who looked a lot like Lily and looked a lot like a few other people that I've had interactions with, which have this very specific look that remind me of the girl off the show Mythic Quest and Lily, who they look like they're going to snap, that they would be the person that grabs a butcher knife and just starts maniacally stabbing everyone in the room, but they're keeping it on a really short leash, a really short leash. And they're friendly, they're smart, they're sweet. It's unsettling because it does not look genuine. It definitely looks like they have practiced this in front of a mirror. And because I think I've met a good handful of people that are a lot like Lily, I love Lily. I just love her. I love her performance very much because it comes across as some people I've met that I'm like, ooh, this is someone you're going to walk on eggshells around and not know why. It's great. Whether she has a demon in her or not. I think that this person, whether they were to believe that they're like this because of trauma that they've gone through, or if this would be genuinely just their personality, disordered or not, that this is just what they'd be like, isn't all bad. I actually enjoy Lily, and I think I would enjoy her company, whether I was unsettled by it or not.
Well, I tell you this much. She seems like she would be quiet as a church mouse. So that's definitely a parallel play type friend. She's going to sit and maybe read a book and not speak for 8 hours. That seems to be the vibe that she has.
Do you think Jack and June have a relationship outside of this particular show? and had met, or are at a stretch lovers?
Well, I'll tell you, I've seen this film a couple of times now, because I wanted to prepare for the show. And it certainly seems to imply that they had a previous acquaintance. Lily keeps almost like putting her on blast and saying, June thinks you're very handsome, Jack. Very handsome. You're very handsome. June thinks you're so like, and to let you know that June has definitely been talking about Jack. Now, is she talking about Jack because they know each other, or is she talking about Jack because he's on television? Right? This is a person that you can see 5 times a week if you're so inclined. So it might be that parasocial connection that we're observing. However, unless I missed some dialogue or misunderstood something, it certainly implies that they might know something. But the only reason why it makes me hesitate to say, oh yeah, they definitely were lovers, is because of how not dismissive Jack is. And like, not dismissive, but like, okay, well, we're not talking about that. He doesn't acknowledge it. He doesn't want to deal with it. Now, is that because his persona is so tied up to, you're the TV host with the dead wife, and you brought your cancer-ridden dead wife or dying wife onto your show and she died 2 weeks later? Is like, so there's a lot of questions that's not entirely clear. So this is the long way of saying, not sure.
Yeah, I'm not really sure either. I've seen people read right into it, into like, oh, he must have been banging this chick while his dying wife was bedridden. It's like, whoa, where are you getting that from?
Yeah.
There's only two sort of things that make me think that they have some sort of relationship. And it's that sort of like, again, the reality and the veil being thin between the two things kind of comes into play when he kisses her on the cheek as she walks onto the stage in her big intro. She gives him a look of like, oh, don't do that. I thought we discussed no public displays of affection. That's the look I get from her. And it's like, oh, okay. So there have been more affectionate displays. The way that they stand so very, very close in the behind the scenes footage, it looks like he's going in for another actual kiss. That they're used to doing. They seem very, very comfortable with each other that close. And some of her admonishing him later on, like, we talked about this, Jack. We're not going to do this. I'm like, well, how often do you guys talk? And was this like over breakfast? Just asking. Because it seems to me that it probably was. And I know that I don't usually like read into characters quite this much, but it seems so very telegraphed that there's more here. And I think that that's just really creative and artful and a really well done characterization, that we're getting these like hints that there's more to their relationship. Like there's so much more to so many things about Jack and Jack's life. But they don't. So you've seen it a good handful of times. I've seen it twice now. Yeah. And I don't like, there's no line that says we're dating or we had breakfast together or you're staying at my house or like last year in Vegas or whatever.
No, I've seen this
Nothing
three times as of today. I've seen this film 3 times because I watched it when it came out. I watched it with Cassie and their friend, and then I watched it today. So that's 3.
Did you notice the dead wife's face reflected in the black mirror that's on the table?
Only because I've seen the memes where they're like, where people are like, here's all the stuff that you missed that you didn't know that there was like ghosts and stuff like that. So yes, I did. It's probably about time we talk about Mr. Wriggles.
You mean Captain Howdy?
Yeah. This possession scene is really interesting, and it's hard to watch a possession scene where you're looking at somebody tied to furniture and not think of The Exorcist, or some of the other The Last Exorcism, other sort of like well-known possession type films, Ruby to a lesser extent, if anyone remembers that one. But this all culminates into a grand display. We have electricity, we have power outages, we have chairs levitating. Surely this being broadcast on television, surely there being like 100 witnesses, surely everyone present, we have definitive proof that demonic possession is possible and real. But Carmichael says no, that he believes that this is a mass hypnosis technique, and he's going to prove it by demonstrating it on Gus. And he is going to I love this sequence for how fucking weird it is. And there's something about this film that you don't expect it to be as gory or as weird as it is. And when they use the practical effects, so what ends up happening is Carmichael is talking to Gus, who's all of a sudden getting very hot. And he's talking about how he doesn't like worms. It's a phobia of his. And then he feels quite itchy. And then he pulls a singular worm from his flesh, and that causes him to like open up his jacket and freak out, and he rips into his own abdomen, and his guts and innards all spill out, and he's just chock-a-block full of worms. And then one giant worm, the king of all worms, Lydia, is also inside of his stomach, and it's a big rubbery, it kind of looks like one of those like 10-pound gummy worms. Like it kind of looks like one of those. And of course, this is all a hypnosis technique. And Carmichael has hypnotized the entire studio, with the exception of several people who didn't know what they were talking about. And this causes them to go back and look at the tapes. And then when we see what is quote unquote actually happening, and it's Gus just flipping out as if he's been hypnotized, and there's no worms, no nothing. And so it is Carmichael's explanation about, well, we thought this demonic possession had happened, and we thought this chair had levitated. And if it's not you, Mr. Jack Delroy, being a flim-flam artist yourself, trying to make sure that you get ratings, well, then it's mass hypnosis. And so they go back and check the tapes. The one interesting thing about the possession is it very much seems unplanned. Like June is able to induce the state in Lily by hypnotizing her, but it seemed as though because June does not want to do this.
Mm-hmm. She doesn't want to put Lily through this. Not only because it seems to be a little terrifying and quite taxing, and this is like a patient-doctor thing. Lily's all for it, I will say. Lily's like, yeah, I want to be on Jack's show. I want to get possessed on Jack's show. Time to do a chair on Jack's show. This is great. She's smiling at the cameras like, which camera do I look at, guys? Kind of thing. She's stoked. She's in on this. The biggest reason, though, that June doesn't want to do this is that Lily's been unpredictable lately. And she's not sure she can keep everything in check. And it might go off the rails. And she seems to be pretty adamant that we shouldn't do this because it's dangerous. And she's right. It is super fucking dangerous. And it looks very painful and dangerous for Lily herself, let alone the rest of the studio audience, as we will see. But and Jack specifically. But her face changes. Her voice changes. Very typical. Like you said, we've checked the boxes of demonic possession in the golden age of film through the years. We see all the techniques that we need to see to believe that this is a TV possession, with the change in voice, change in demeanor, the swearing, the talking about sex things, knowing things they shouldn't know, all those fucking things. She does all that, but she's got this huge gash that starts to form on the side of her face that looks absolutely painful. Like it's another moment where like the effects in this really do work very well for me. So I really enjoyed that a lot. But when they play it back, I like this that we've been shown yet another moment where whether you're in the audience in the theater or at home watching, they make a nod to us where you might have seen what you were hypnotized by Carr into seeing, or you were probably hypnotized by Jack and the doctor and Lily. Even the studio audience sitting there at home might have thought they saw worms coming out of Gus's stomach. And it's like, okay, here I am watching this movie, and that's what happened because that's what happened in the movie. But, ooh, I saw it because I was hypnotized too. Because they do spend a lot of time showing us that spinning clock, hypnotic spiral thing. And, you know, I don't know if you're like me and you're like, you know, I'm not going to look. I don't want to get hypnotized.
I do feel the same way. I'm like, no. I don't want to get caught under your spell, magical man.
It's ridiculous. It is so ridiculous. But that's, you know, the fun of the carnival, right?
That's the power of symbolism. That's what we have all accepted is it's like if you play with a Ouija board, you are going to talk to the dead. If you have someone wave a clock or a spirally thing, that's how you get hypnotized. Oh, I don't want to get hypnotized, says a person who's never been hypnotized.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. I would probably be that person in the audience not being hypnotized. I have gone to see a mesmer. What do you call those people?
Like a hypnotist?
A hypnotist. Thank you very much. Not a man. Sorry. Yeah, a hypnotist. And it did work on some people in the audience, so to speak. And I don't know, I'm assuming that they're all just plants when he like hypnotizes the 12 people on stage, and some people in the audience just sort of slump over in their seats and he gets them up on stage too, because, you know, it obviously worked on them. They were highly suggestible or whatever. It's weird. And there were people that were acting odd in the audience that weren't plants for sure, that I knew, like, as people that were there attending with the group of people I was with. And it's like, wow, is this working on you? Like, seriously, dude? They would be hypnotized watching this show.
I knew a guy when I was training in jiu-jitsu, and they all went to a hypnotist, and I didn't go, but someone had the presence of mind to record it. And this guy who, like, I never believed that hypnotism was even at all possible. I thought it was all hocus pocus, like carnival tricks, like you said, plants in the audience and all that kind of shit. My friend seemed to fall for it so hard and so completely. He was up on stage. He was like, they had to stop him from trying to take his clothes off. He was pretending to like ride a horse, like, and a bronco type thing. It was outrageous. And I just watched it absolutely shocked that he was behaving this way. And I had that same reaction you did. Like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, what were you doing? And he was like, I don't remember any of it.
Was it Paul Reuter? Was that the hypnotist he went to see? I worked for Paul Reuter for a number of years.
I don't remember what the hypnotist was. Of course you worked for a hypnotist. What? What?
Yeah. When I come out of college the first time in 1995 or so, I worked at a Express Print in North Bay, Ontario, with some really cool bosses. And there was a duo of guys that owned the print shop. And one of them was the hypnotist Paul Reuter. And he owned the print shop mostly to print all of his tickets and his itineraries and his the little memento booklets that you pass out at those shows. So he printed all of those things. And his partner was more of like a design-minded guy and businessman. So it was a business printing place, like little mini Staples, just the print shop portion of Staples. That's what it was. And we did all the Paul Reuter stuff. And he wasn't in there a lot because he was touring like nonstop as a hypnotist, because that's what he did. And yeah, Paul was a very cool dude. He wasn't a showman when I saw him, because when I interacted with him, he was just like, "Hey, Lydia, you got the tickets for me? Cool." You know, showing up in a tie-dye shirt and Birkenstocks, not the suit and tie that he wore on stage ever. I never saw him like in close proximity dressed for the stage. But I did go to see his stage show because we did have free passes to see Paul Reuter whenever we wanted. And it was a very neat thing. His voice, though, that was the thing that got me the most. Was his voice was 100% absolutely different on stage than it was in real life. In real life, talking to you or I, he was just a regular dude. But when he got on stage, it was the hypnotic voice. And it would always go down at the end. And there was always this lulling sense of calm and chill and relaxation. It was so weird. Like, to hear him talk as a hypnotist was like all hypnotics, all hypnotics. What is the word again?
Hypnotists.
Hypnotists. Thank you. All hypnotists do this, and Carmichael does this on the show. I can hear the Paul Reuter voice coming at you.
That is yet another bit of Lydia lore that you only get at the Dead Air podcast. That's fascinating. And just when I think I know everything about you, man, you fucking give me another one. That's incredible. Chris, who died, by the way. I don't know if they had to take him away in an ambulance to go to hospital, and he did not make it. And that seems to be the first inkling, at least to Carmichael, that this is serious.
What's interesting is, like, during the show, you can hear the ambulance siren, and where I live, there's ambulance sirens and fire sirens and police sirens all over the place because it's a city. And I wasn't sure if I was hearing the siren on the show. And so when I heard a siren outside and someone on the show, Jack specifically, kind of perked up and listened like he was hearing a siren, it was kind of confusing to me as to whether this was reality or the show.
That's actually pretty in keeping with the entire theme of this. Is it happening? Is it not happening? Type situation. When they go back and they look at this footage definitively, they are seeing frame by painstaking frame that this possession was caught on film. Carmichael doesn't want to believe it. Gus and all of them have been pretty much ready to jump ship within 5 minutes of the fucking broadcast. They are expressing, we're messing with forces that no one is meant to mess with. And they want to leave immediately. But now shit is getting real, because when Carmichael is accusing Jack of this is all a fucking fraud. You are trying to get ratings. You want to beat Carson. And by doing this, you are lying to people and perpetuating all of these myths. And you're undermining my work. And they're really at each other's throats. And, well, Lily becomes possessed again. And this time, Lydia, she gets possessed in a way that I have never seen before. And I think it might be my favorite aspect of this film. Like, you know, the aesthetic, all the acting is really good. I love the practical effects. But this is so unique and so interesting. It's almost, what you want to say, like, she looks almost extraterrestrial rather than demonic, and her head splits in twine, and we have this sort of conservatively dressed petite teenage girl with this bulbous split glowing. You can see it's almost like you put your finger in front of a flashlight and it has that reddish white yellow illumination, and everyone is going fucking crazy. There's chaos in the audience, there's chaos on the studio, the crew is running. June and Gus tries to get control of the situation, and this is where the first like on-screen death is so visceral and ruthless. His head is twisted 180 degrees, and the best part about it is he drops like a sack of fucking potatoes right into the coffee table. There's no drama. It's just crack, slump, and everyone is freaking the fuck out. June has the ability, or tries to gain control. She's got this artifact around her neck that she is able to show Abraxas. Are we assuming this is Abraxas? Is Mr. Wriggles?
It's got to be. It just simply has to be. And I mean, I'm not going to go deep into like Gnostic literature to describe the etymology of Abraxas, aside from what's already mentioned in this show, where he's probably the fount of the word abracadabra. You can learn that on Wikipedia as well. But like, is he a demon? Is he really a demon? Is he capable of doing this? But okay, I'm for sake of brevity, yeah, she's possessed by Abraxas, because the demon within the next two kills makes a joke about it, and I think it's fucking hilarious. But yeah, I like that Gus earlier, when he was doing his worm thing, he made an exorcist joke about having his head twisted around. Just, my wife wants my head to point in the same direction, ha ha ha. And when he tears his shirt open, we see that little tiny gold crucifix that he wears, that he uses in the very, exorcist way of "get thee behind me, Satan." And he's brandishing this little tiny crucifix before his head gets snapped off, basically. It's great. The next kill reminds me a little bit of like Phantasm Halloween, like having a girl hoisted up by that thing when June is like, because she has it around her neck as well. Now, what is it with necklaces and exorcisms, man? It's hoisted up in the air by Abraxas and chokes her, cuts her throat, extremely bloody, decapitation, before it drops her body like yet another sack of potatoes. I don't know what that sigil is or what that little artifact is. Did they mention it, or do you have any idea?
It seems runic. It seems as though, which would tie in if it's Abraxas, it seems as though it would be either it is a sigil that would maybe perhaps have his symbol, or something that it's adherent to. I think when it comes to possession films, and just to walk back a little bit, what you were saying about what is with the necklaces, I think because whether or not it's the Judeo-Christian cross, the Star of David, or even a pentagram, or in this case, some kind of runic symbol of Abraxas, it's the affront of a symbol of organized religion or beliefs. It's a thing that humans use as a symbol of their spiritual strength, worked against them as a noose to like, and it's when an entity, a malevolent entity, is asserting its dominance, what better and more demonstrable way to do that than to use the symbol of your protection against you as an instrument of your own destruction. So I think that's how come it's just so you can't resist it. It's just too, perhaps it's a little bit overdone and low hanging fruit in terms of narrative speaking, but when you're writing these types of stories, I don't blame anyone for wanting to do it, because it's such a arrogant display of power and dominance. And that's what this Abraxas or whoever is possessing Lily, this is a display of dominance, up to and including mocking Carmichael's understanding of what this was. Because what does Carmichael do in his defense? First of all, immediately pledges his allegiance. Like, immediately is like, I'll suck your fucking cock. What do I have to do to survive this situation? And he is gonna like hand Lily a check. Like, Abraxas is gonna go to the bank, and like he needs some money.
It's the closest thing he's got to brandish. You know, he's not wearing a cross or a sigil or an artifact. So he's got a $500,000 check.
And interestingly enough, like, as a person like Carmichael, who is so vain and deals in that world of like the modern world, the scientific world, and we can like believes everyone is just like a crook who's trying to fleece people out of money. And he believes that the highest calling for people is money, because that's why he uses a reward system. If you can prove to me that you're legit, I will give you money. Isn't that what we're all after? And so by trying to offer money to this entity, it's hilarious. Abracadabra, Lydia. It goes up in smoke, and he gets a deliciously painful immolation.
Which is insane, because in a little bit, when we are looking at the carnage, when we get a chance to take a look at the carnage yet again, it's like all of this could be pretty natural. Like, you could have studio mishaps that cause a lot of these deaths, but someone was burnt to death within an instant with nothing else around them catching fire. Mm-hmm. That is some pretty demonic power, if you ask me. Yay, Abraxas.
When this carnage is unleashed into the studio, Jack is terrified, rightfully so. Everyone, his friends are dead. We never really see what happens to his producer, old Leo Fisk there, who's been in and out of like the behind the scenes stuff. You're like, what happened to this guy? I'm assuming he turned tail and run immediately. But now Jack is in previous scenes that we've already seen in the film. Now, when they were doing their sort of monologue-y documentary style intro, they showed a lot of comedy sketches, interviews that he had done in previous episodes, and he finds himself there in the past again, but everything's at that Dutch tilt. You know, things are a little weird. It's a little surreal. The camera is zooming in, it's zooming out. Everything seems quite strange and dreamlike, we shall say. And he is aware that he is out of place and out of time. No one else seems to be. To their perception, it seems as though he's acting a little loopy. He's acting dazed, in a fugue state. And everyone's like, this isn't the line we rehearsed, Jack. Like,
he's like, what the hell? Where am I? What happened? Where's the studio? Why am I in the why are you here? You know? And so it explains to us that he is, like you said, out of time and out of place. Some of the audience members seem to be living in whatever time slip he's in at the moment, because a few of them do rise up and approach the stage slowly and become part of like a congregation that seems to be forming.
There's a lot of talk about who, while we were watching the film, who is a member of this grove, who's sitting in the audience in a Halloween costume, which is a great touch, by the way. We didn't talk about that. Not only is there Halloween decorations everywhere, there's people in Halloween costumes. And it's very very well done. There's that guy in the skeleton costume who doesn't speak or really move is particularly creepy. It's very well done. This is I'm of two minds when it comes to this dream sequence, for lack of a better.
So is Lily.
Oh, you. That's That's some late night level banter right there. Hi-oh. But there's something about this film that is as interesting to me as profoundly disappointing. And it really culminated in this sequence. I really wanted this to be presented to me as either a documentary or like we have uncovered lost film. So there was a grittiness and dirtiness and rawness to that I wanted it to be there. And especially with the behind the scenes stuff is way too crisp and clean. What is someone following them around with like a 70-pound shoulder camera from the 1970s, like to get all this footage? Why were they filming? That's not how these stations operate. They never have, they never will. But then this dream sequence, it's like, okay, so this isn't the raw tape. This is happening in Jack's mind. So why am I watching this? So I don't, and to me, it was like the film couldn't decide if it wanted to. It starts as a documentary. Okay, no, we're just going to show you the raw episode that was lost and was found in mothballs. But we're also going to show some extra behind the scenes stuff that normally would have been edited out. Let's just pretend. But now we're going to show you a sequence that definitely is not in the documentary and definitely is not part of a found tape that we have discovered after all of these years. So it's like three different things happening at once. It's interesting and it's cool, but it's not what I was expecting. And in the end, not what I wanted. And so I think that this is really the moment for me that keeps it from being all-time classic.
The only reason I like this scene, because I find it's a little bit drawn out and a little pandering, especially with the dead wife stuff, because I'm really tired of that already. But it does, fit. I can reconcile it in that, well, we didn't see worms come out of Gus either. And everything that's happening in Jack's head in this sequence is happening on the stage. So we have, again, without them telling us though, because they've stopped spoon feeding us, thankfully, we're seeing a hypnotic thing, and we're only brought out of it by like the final scene. And I like that this leads to that final scene. So that's two reasons that I can live with it, is that it's yet another hypnotic thing that does happen on the stage, even though we understand it is happening in Jack's head. But was the whole night not in a way happening in Jack's head and in a hypnotic trance in many ways? And that, yes, it leads to this final scene, even though it takes a bit to get there. And as you would say, they pulled the taffy.
The dead wife stuff comes in at a place where I can't tell if they're like, pretty crazy reveal. Whereas I'm sitting there like, aren't we all supposed to know this already? Didn't you telegraph? Like he wanted to become popular. He was struggling in the ratings. He got what he wanted. He got this big juicy deal. And then his wife mysteriously died, like randomly. And even that helped elevate him. And you talked about this grove and Abraxas, and even the wife talked about like this like baffling, like almost bohemian orgy encounter where she's trying to tell her how much she loved her husband. And I'll be like, why are you telling this story this is not an appropriate story. I guess you're dying of cancer, so we'll give you a pass. But like, this is a wild ass fucking thing to say on national TV. But so,
well, that was the show she was in though. And that's the one line at the beginning of what she was talking about, is that she was describing when they met, she was in this show. And that was, yeah.
Oh God. You know what?
Because at that time, and at the time that they would have met, given the timing of their relationship and the years that this was supposed to be taking place, a Dionysus 69 would have been very popular in off Broadway and all over the world as that one play where everyone, in some instances, I think there were sex acts on stage, but in all of them, they all got all naked, the whole cast, stripped down to nothing. And some people in the audience were encouraged to do so as well. Yeah, I've never seen the play, obviously, because I have no idea, and I was not alive in 1969. But yeah, Dionysus 69 was a play. And you will, if you meet some older theater people, they'll make jokes about Dionysus 69. If somebody's like, ooh, that's a pretty scantily clad girl there, and they'll be like, yeah, it's no Dionysus 69, but I agree. And us young ones don't get it.
You know what? And I, not even that young, did not get it. So thanks for explaining that to me. That helps that quite a bit, actually. But like I said, this doesn't necessarily ruin anything for me. It just makes me wonder. It makes it seem as though they had 3 different ideas for what they wanted this movie to be, and they couldn't decide, so they did all 3. And it's kind of surprising to me that more people, again, praise all the way up and down for this film. It's great, and I don't want anyone to think that I don't like this movie, but I just find it interesting that it was really, in my opinion, marketed to me a certain way, and it just really wasn't that. But that being said, it doesn't ruin anything for me. So and
it leads to this really cool scene.
Yes, which I do like quite a bit. You know, after Jack, you know, re-kills his wife, who's begging him to impale her with the knife. He's convinced so easily. He's like, oh yeah, okay, I'll stab you in the gut. And by the way, it's like, please put me out of my misery. And then proceeds to stab her in one of the places where it will take you the longest to fucking die. Oh, I'll just slowly pierce your gut, honey. That'll finish you off in about 20 to 35 minutes.
If not longer, because you could live from this, but just have horrible sepsis.
When he comes to, he is cradling not his wife in a hospital bed, but young Lily. She, no longer possessed, no longer alive, surrounded by the bodies of his friends and co-workers. And Lily's prophecy now come true. She had a feeling that at the end of this night, you would be very famous indeed, Jack Delroy.
And all Jack can say is, dreamer, here, awake, having a feeling that this is not happening, hoping to hell, no pun intended, that this is not happening.
And then we're out of here. So I like I said, this is a really great film, and it's very interesting. And I think that one of the reasons why this film has gotten so much attention is because it's so interesting. Every decision they make is not what you expected. And maybe any disappointment I feel with the film is because my expectations were straightforward and linear, and they were not interested in telling that type of story.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. And I think that almost in a way they're thumbing their nose at people who are going to watch the first 10 minutes of this film and be like, well, I figured it all out.
Mm-hmm.
He pledged his wife as a sacrifice to get famous. And now what? I don't care. I like that. The question I've had, and that a lot of people seem to have, is, okay, so he sacrificed his wife. Sacrificed his wife, got all famous. Therein lies the rub. He didn't get all famous.
Nope.
There was a year of nothing. His show was on the rocks. He would have sacrificed her, so to speak, well before she died. She had a long, slow, agonizing, terrible death. Even the show where he brought his dead wife on the show 2 weeks before she died, it did good. But, like, that's pretty sad. for it to be the best show so far, because he'd been tanking for years at this point, and it still didn't help his show. It didn't fix everything. He spent a year doing God knows what, hanging out at the Grove more or what. So the timing is just off for me, in that, you sacrificed your wife, you get your deal with the devil and fame and fortune, right? Not a year-long hiatus of nothing and then trying to desperately claw back some ratings on this one final Halloween night.
There's this episode of Star Trek The Next Generation. Stay with me, I'm going somewhere with this.
Hopefully.
I'm sorry. There's an episode of Star Trek The Next Generation in which there's this god that returns to this planet and wants credit for them praying to this population praying to them and fixing their planet, fixing their population explosions, fixing the environment, fixing all of their illnesses and stuff like that. And so she wants to come back and be ruler of the planet. And the people basically like don't want to do this because this is an errant god. They were far and away removed. And so this culminates into a trial about, can we prove that this god actually did anything to help these people? And she was just like, well, I have all these incredible powers and I was able to fix her planet. But when they delved into how the planet actually fixed itself, it was through policy changes, through like people working hard, and the aliens of that planet fixed their planet all by themselves. And it reminds me very much of this, in which a demon's dominion isn't Earth, that's humans' dominion. And the only people that can rule and control their destiny on Earth is other humans. You fuck Abraxas. That grove had celebrities, captains of industry, like high-ranking politicians, high-ranking military people. They said all of this. Why do you need to sacrifice your wife? The people that you have a gentleman's club with are more than capable of making sure that you get ahead in life. It seems as though that it is all under the umbrella of, well, you sacrifice your wife to Abraxas, so Abraxas gets the sacrifice, and then all these great things will happen. Seems to me like Abraxas has got a pretty good racket going with this thing, where he can just get endless sacrifices and promises to improve people's lives. But at the end of the day, you can't make people watch your show. You have to make your show interesting. So there he was. He got his deal. I bet you that he got that deal because of the members at the Grove, not because Abraxas got him a contract, but because people who knew people who knew people who knew people and got him this deal. And at the end of the day, it's up to you, dude. Every person on Earth, it's down to you to manifest your own destiny. And so, like, I think that's the real trick of this demon.
And part of it is that he had sacrificed his wife to the devil to become successful on his show, and then did what for a year? Not his show. He did something else. He went on a hiatus of some sort. Mm-hmm. So, like, I guess you didn't sacrifice your wife to, improve your golf game. So yeah, whatever you're doing out there isn't going to make you successful, because you were pretty specific in the terms of the deal here, so to speak. Now, do you think that the devil himself or herself, whatever, will be like fair like that? The devil itself mm-hmm. had manifested because of a doorway opened by Abraxas? Or was it simply just this lesser demon, who may not be a demon at all, Abraxas?
I think it's the shenanigans of a lesser demon fucking with humans. Like, because this is a classic demon 101. What does it want? To mess up your life, to ruin things, to make you miserable, to oppress you, make you lose hope, and to kill, and to bring misery. Because it's not like, clearly They could kill Jack Delroy anytime they wanted. But it's not about killing Jack Delroy. It's about ruining his life. That's the best part. That's the icing on the cake. You're alive and miserable. Maybe he'll go to jail. Maybe what? We don't know his fate.
I'd like to see a Late Night with the Devil 2. Early Morning Breakfast with Satan.
What do we got next for him?
Coming up next, we will hang out with a few more satanish folk with Lords of Salem. I really enjoyed this film. I doubly enjoyed the book, and I'm really looking forward to talking about it and watching it again.
Yeah, we've only ever handled a Rob Zombie joint once before, where we did what some listeners called the definitive and final word on Rob Zombie's House of a Thousand Corpses, which I will never forget. What a great compliment. But we are going back to the well again and talking about one of the most controversial monster kids in all of horror, and what I feel is his best film. So that I've seen. I have not seen all of his films. Well, I haven't seen 31.
I believe I've seen all of his films, and I've seen all of his films with Sherry Moon Zombie in it, except any of the music videos she was in. But I would say that this is Sherry Moon Zombie's best film as well. I love her in this. I love her so much in this.
Yes. Very fun to watch, and it'll be great to revisit it. I have not watched this film, basically since it came out. So I'll be happy to revisit it. But and we don't have to sacrifice anything. You have to sacrifice you. You don't have to sacrifice me. It's going to happen.
And as much as that movie ends with a song, a demonic song, here we are on our outro today. I'm going to leave the new intro song in its entirety from Anorax.
I'm Wes Knipe.
And I'm Typical Lydia.
And you've been listening to Dead Air and Anorax. If you like this show, you can find more episodes and other content on splatterpictures.net, Spotify, or wherever you download podcasts. We also upload all episodes to YouTube now, if you'd prefer to listen that way. You can find us across social media like Instagram, X, and TikTok, and the show is edited by Lydia Peaver and hosted by Lydia Peaver and me, Wes Knipe. We'll see you next time.